My in-laws claimed my unborn baby had no rights to my husband's wealth, so they blocked me from his bank accounts. Until my DNA test exposed their lies and got them sued for fraud. It was the phone call that changed everything. I still remember the way my heart sank when I saw the name on the screen. It was the lawyer, the one who had been handling my husband's affairs for the past few years. I hadn't heard from him since James's funeral, and I couldn't help but feel a little sick to my stomach as I swiped to answer. I had expected the usual follow-up messages, the ones telling me everything was fine, that the legal paperwork was on track and that the estate was in order. But that was not what I got. Ms. Hawthorne. His voice was cold, professional, and it made my pulse race. There's an issue with the inheritance. I froze. My throat tightened and for a moment I couldn't say anything. All I could hear was the sound of my own heartbeat loud in my ears. I had just lost James, the love of my life, and now I was hearing that something was wrong with his estate. My mind spun in 1,000 directions, but I couldn't find the words to ask what was going on. What do you mean? I finally managed to choke out. The family is contesting the inheritance, he said flatly. They're claiming your unborn child has no legal rights to the estate. I just want to take a quick second to express my gratitude to each one of you for joining me on this journey. Your support means the world, and if you're finding these stories of strength and perseverance inspiring, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It's free and helps us grow this wonderful community. Now let's get into it. I felt the floor drop out from under me. What? My mind reeled as his words echoed in my head. It couldn't be true. I thought we had everything in order, everything was supposed to be smooth. But now this. It felt like a punch to the gut, one I couldn't recover from. Before I could respond, he continued. I'm sorry, Ms. Hawthorne, but it seems that your in-laws are blocking access to the funds. They've frozen all accounts related to your husband's estate, and they're refusing to acknowledge your baby's rights to any of it. They've made it very clear that they consider the inheritance to belong to the family, not to you or your child. My blood ran cold. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. Was this really happening? After everything James and I had been through, after the plans we made together, I was being robbed of everything, and now they were doing this to my child. I wanted to scream, to fight back, but there was no way to fight them, was there? His family, his wealthy, influential family, had always been like this. I'd known they didn't like me from the start, but to do something like this, to destroy everything I had left? This was betrayal on a level I hadn't even imagined. I struggled to keep my voice steady. How can they do this? How can they just take everything from me? I don't know, the lawyer replied, his tone softer now. But we're working on it. I'm doing everything I can to protect your interests, but they're determined to block your access. They're making it as difficult as possible. I closed my eyes, my mind racing. How had it come to this? James had always been so protective of me, of our future, of our child. I thought we had a solid foundation. But now it felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, ready to fall. I ended the call, but the numbness didn't leave. My mind kept spinning as I stared at the phone, trying to process what had just happened. How could they do this? How could his own family turn on me like this? The questions swirled around me, but I had no answers. All I could do was feel the weight of the betrayal settle in my chest, crushing me. I felt the tears begin to sting my eyes, but I wouldn't let them fall. Not yet. Not when I needed to be strong, when I needed to protect my baby. But the pain, oh, the pain was unbearable. I never imagined I'd be facing something like this, not in my worst nightmares. My mind kept flashing back to James. His smile, his laughter, the way he always made me feel safe. How could his family turn against us like this? As the shock slowly began to wear off, anger started to creep in. Anger at them, at myself, at the world for letting this happen. But most of all, anger at the way they were treating my unborn child. This wasn't just about money, it was about power. It was about control. They wanted to erase me, erase my child, as if we didn't matter. As if our future didn't matter. But I wasn't going to let them. I couldn't. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. I wasn't going to let this happen. I wasn't going to roll over and let them win. They could take the money, they could take the house, but they couldn't take my dignity. They couldn't take my right to stand up for what was mine, what was rightfully my baby's. I would fight them, even if it meant going up against the wealth and power of James's family. I had nothing left to lose. I stood up and walked over to the window, looking out at the street below. It was quiet, too quiet, but in the silence I could hear the resolve building inside me. I wasn't alone. I had my baby and that was all I needed. I would fight with everything I had. This wasn't just about money. This was about protecting the legacy of the man I loved, protecting my child from the greed of people who had never cared about us. They had underestimated me and they would regret it. The game was about to change and I was going to make sure I was the one who won. But first I needed to figure out how to get through this. How to fight back. I couldn't do it alone. I reached for my phone again, determined to call the lawyer back, but before I could, I heard a knock at the door. It was soft, almost hesitant, but the sound made my heart race. Who could it be at this hour? I wasn't expecting anyone. I walked to the door, my pulse quickening. When I opened it, I found James's brother, Nathaniel, standing there. His face was grim, his eyes wary, as though he knew what I was going to say before I even said it. "Can we talk?" he asked quietly. I nodded, stepping aside to let him in, though I wasn't sure what I was going to say. The man who had once been my brother-in-law, the one I'd thought I could trust, was now standing in front of me, the person I least expected to help. Or perhaps the person I feared the most. "Of course," I said, my voice steady though my heart was pounding. As he stepped into the room, I felt the weight of what was happening settle even heavier on my shoulders. This was just the beginning and I wasn't sure where it was going to lead. But I knew one thing, I wasn't backing down. The fight had only just begun. Nathaniel stepped into the living room and for a moment neither of us spoke. The air was thick with the tension of everything that had just been unleashed, the weight of what I was about to confront now falling on my shoulders. His presence felt both comforting and suffocating at the same time. I had never been so uncertain about anyone in my life. "How much did you hear?" I asked, finally breaking the silence. My voice was steady, but I could feel the sharp edge of my anger just beneath the surface. He shifted uncomfortably, his eyes not meeting mine. "Enough to know that things have gotten complicated." His tone was careful, as if he was choosing his words with caution. "I didn't think it would come to this." I clenched my fist. "Complicated? Nathaniel, they've locked me out of everything. They're trying to steal everything that's rightfully mine, rightfully my child's. And you're standing here talking to me like it's some misunderstanding. They don't want me to have any of it. They want to take everything from us and you know it." He took a deep breath and finally met my gaze. His eyes, like James's, held a familiar sorrow, but there was something colder in them now. The warmth I once found in his presence seemed to have disappeared. "Look, I'm not here to defend them. I'm here because I know what they're capable of," he said quietly. "I didn't want you to find out this way." "Then why didn't you warn me? Why didn't you?" He cut me off with a raised hand. "I tried. But they're too powerful, Rachel. They've always had the upper hand. It's hard to fight them. I didn't want you caught in the crossfire." Caught in the crossfire? I felt a burning heat rise in my chest and I could feel my cheeks flush with the intensity of my emotions. I wasn't just some innocent bystander. I was James's wife. I was carrying his child, the child who had every right to the inheritance. Our inheritance. And yet here I was fighting not just for my dignity but for something even more precious. My future, my baby's future. You don't get to say that to me. You don't get to pretend like I don't have a right to be furious. They're trying to erase us. Erase my baby. You've seen what they've done. You've seen the lies they've been spreading about me. How much more of this do you think I can take? My voice shook with every word. Each syllable was a reflection of my disbelief, my hurt, and my mounting rage. Nathaniel flinched, a flicker of guilt passing across his face. "Rachel, I'm not the enemy here. I don't want to see you hurt. I never did." I shook my head, backing away. "Then why didn't you stand up to them sooner? Why didn't you say something when you knew what they were doing?" He didn't answer and I could see the truth hanging between us. The truth that he had been a silent observer, complicit in his own way, not brave enough to challenge his family, not willing to go against them even if it meant losing the respect of the woman who had once been like a sister to him. I took a step back, feeling the need to put distance between us. "I don't need you to apologize. I need you to help me. I need you to fight with me." Nathaniel sighed, his shoulders sagging as if the weight of his own guilt was finally pressing down on him. "I don't know if I can do that," he murmured, his voice barely audible. "They're already pushing so hard. If you take them on, if you try to fight them, there's going to be a war and you're going to lose more than you think." I swallowed hard, trying to control the surge of emotions threatening to spill over. I've already lost everything, Nathaniel. My husband is dead. I'm alone, and now they're trying to take my baby's future from me. How much more do I have to lose before I stand up for myself? For a moment there was a silence between us, but it wasn't one of comfort. It was a silence filled with unspoken truths, with the awareness that this conversation wasn't over. Nathaniel had always been the quiet one, the one who kept his thoughts to himself, but I could see it now. The conflict, the inner struggle. He knew what his family was capable of, but he had never truly been willing to break free from their control. I can't fight them for you, Rachel, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. But I can give you the tools. I can help you find the truth. You need to expose them, and I can help you do that. It was the first time he had said anything that felt like real support, and for a brief moment I allowed myself to hope. But just as quickly the realization hit me. Hope didn't guarantee victory. I still had a long, dangerous road ahead. Tools? I asked, trying to keep the skepticism from creeping into my voice. What tools? He paused before speaking again. You'll need evidence. Proof of everything they've done, everything they're hiding. I know how they've manipulated the system. I know how they've twisted everything to their advantage. You'll need to dig deep. I frowned, unsure of what he meant. Are you talking about my husband's finances? Nathaniel nodded slowly. Exactly. You need to find the accounts they've hidden, the investments they've kept secret, the papers they've altered. You need to find the things they've kept from you, things they didn't want you to see. Because when you expose them, Rachel, they'll have no choice but to back off. But you have to be careful. They'll do anything to stop you. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. His words were not a warning, they were a challenge. I had to dig deeper, fight harder, and use everything I had learned about the family to take them down. The stakes were higher than I had realized, and the path ahead was darker than I'd ever imagined. I'll do whatever it takes, I said, my voice trembling with a mix of fear and resolve. I won't let them win. They think they can walk all over me, but they have no idea who they're dealing with. Nathaniel's expression softened, and for a brief moment, it was as if the weight of his own guilt had lifted. Good. But be careful, Rachel. They'll stop at nothing to keep their secrets safe. If you're going to do this, you need to be smarter than them. You need to stay one step ahead. I nodded, the determination in my chest growing stronger. I will. I'm not afraid anymore. Nathaniel didn't say anything more, but I could tell he was leaving me to figure out the next steps on my own. I was alone in this fight, but that was how it had to be. I couldn't rely on anyone else. If I wanted to win, I had to take control. As Nathaniel walked out of the door, I stared after him, my heart racing with a mixture of fear and resolve. I knew that the next move was mine to make, and I wasn't going to back down. The fight had only just begun. The weight of everything, the betrayal, the loss, the overwhelming uncertainty, pressed on me with each passing moment. As Nathaniel left, I found myself standing alone in the middle of the living room, the silence swallowing up the space around me. The walls seemed to close in, and for the first time since James's death, I felt utterly, impossibly alone. I moved to the window, staring out at the city below. The world was still turning, the traffic moving steadily along, people coming and going, unaware of the storm that was raging inside me. I should have felt a sense of calm looking out at the city I knew so well, but instead, all I could see were the walls closing in, the in-laws' grasp tightening around my throat. I wasn't sure how much longer I could keep up the fight. They were powerful, connected, and their resources were endless. What did I have? A few memories, a burning desire for justice, and the future of my child. If I could protect it. The phone in my hand felt heavier than it should have. I hadn't heard from the lawyer since Nathaniel's visit, and I knew I had to take action soon. But where to start? How could I fight an army of lies with nothing but my instinct and determination? I dialed the lawyer's number, the familiar beep of the ringtone echoing in the quiet room. After what felt like an eternity, he finally picked up. Miss Hawthorne, he greeted me, his voice a little more weary than I remembered. How are you holding up? I didn't know how to answer that. I wasn't okay. How could I be? I'm still here, I said, my voice tight. But I need your help. I need you to get me access to the accounts. The family's blocking everything. What do we do now? There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and I could almost feel the weight of his hesitation. Rachel, I need to be honest with you, he finally said. It's going to be difficult. They've already made their case. They've been planning this for a long time. I clenched my teeth, frustration building inside me like a pressure cooker. I don't care how long they've been planning it. This is my husband's estate. My child's inheritance. They can't just take it. You're right, the lawyer responded, his tone firming up. But they've frozen the accounts. Without court orders, we can't access any of it. And I'm afraid they've set up everything to prevent you from having any claim to it. I could feel my heart racing. The walls seemed to close in tighter, suffocating me with their cold, calculated cruelty. So what? I just give up. Let them take everything. I felt my pulse quicken with the adrenaline of anger, but beneath it, there was the deep, gnawing fear that this might be it, that there was nothing I could do. Not at all, the lawyer said. I'm working on a petition, but it's going to take time. And they won't make it easy. I closed my eyes, holding the phone tightly as I fought to keep my emotions in check. Time. Time was the one thing I didn't have. I was pregnant. Every day mattered. Every moment I felt the future of my child slipping further out of my reach. I stood up abruptly, the room feeling too small, too suffocating. I can't wait. I can't just sit here and do nothing while they make all the decisions. I need to take action now. The lawyer sighed. I understand. But we have to be careful. Any rash moves could make things worse. If they get wind of what you're planning, they could use it against you. The thought of sitting idly by made me want to scream. I had already lost so much. I couldn't lose my child's future too. What if I dig into the finances myself? What if I find something they've hidden? You'd be putting yourself at risk, the lawyer warned. If they discover that you've accessed anything illegally, it could backfire. The last thing you want is for them to accuse you of fraud. I knew he was right. Every move I made needed to be calculated. But how? How was I supposed to just sit here and wait when everything was being ripped from my hands? The lawyer's voice broke through my spiraling thoughts. Rachel, I know this isn't what you want to hear, but right now patience is key. I'll get to work on the petition, but you have to be patient. Patience. The word echoed in my mind as I ended the call. It was a word I hated. It felt like a lifetime of waiting, of doing nothing while they continued to tighten their grip on everything I held dear. I didn't have patience. I had rage. I had an overwhelming need to tear down every wall they built to keep me out, to expose their lies for the world to see. But how? I spent the next few days trying to stay busy, trying to focus on something other than the fear gnawing at my insides. I spent hours going through every piece of paperwork James had ever signed, looking for anything that might give me leverage, some clue that could break the ice. The more I dug, the more I realized how meticulous his family had been. They had covered their tracks well, too well. The deeper I went, the more isolated I felt. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about control. It was about proving that I wasn't just some pawn in their game. They wanted to erase me, and they were willing to destroy everything to do it. Every day that passed, I felt the walls closing in more. It wasn't just the financial isolation. It was the emotional weight too. I couldn't talk to anyone about what was happening, not even Nathaniel. He had left me with nothing but vague promises and half-formed advice, all the while knowing the depth of the danger I was in. I had no one I could trust, no one to help me through the nights when my mind raced, wondering if I was about to lose everything. My only solace was the baby growing inside me. It wasn't just my husband's legacy I was fighting for. It was my child's. My baby deserved better than this. A future free from manipulation, free from lies. But I was alone. The people I thought would protect me had turned their backs. The thought cut through me like a knife, and I struggled to keep my composure. I had to keep going. I had no other choice. One afternoon, a familiar figure appeared on my doorstep. It was Nathaniel, his face tired, his eyes weary but determined. He didn't say anything at first, just stepped inside and closed the door behind him. "What's going on?" I asked, trying to keep the bitterness out of my voice. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I've been doing some digging of my own. I've been talking to a few people who might be able to help." I felt a glimmer of hope spark inside me. "Who? What did you find?" Nathaniel hesitated before speaking. "I can't say yet. But I think I might have found something. But you need to be careful. If they find out, it could get even worse." I wasn't afraid of worse anymore. I was afraid of doing nothing. "Tell me what you found," I demanded, my voice firm, steady. Nathaniel looked at me for a long moment before nodding. "We need to move quickly. I'm going to help you. But we have to play this smart. It was the first real piece of hope I had gotten in days. Maybe, just maybe, I wasn't as isolated as I thought. But I would never stop fighting. Not for me. Not for my baby. The walls may have been closing in, but I was ready to tear them down. Nathaniel's words hung in the air like a lifeline, fragile yet filled with the promise of something more. I think I might have found something, he'd said, and though the words brought a flicker of hope, they also planted a seed of doubt in me. Could I really trust him? Could he be the one to help me tear down the walls my in-laws had so carefully built around my life? I needed to know more. I needed to understand exactly what Nathaniel had uncovered. But as I sat across from him at the kitchen table, the reality of the situation started to sink in. I couldn't rely solely on anyone else. This was my fight now, and I had to be ready to face whatever came next. My baby was counting on me. My future was on the line, and there was no room for hesitation. Where do we start? I asked, my voice steady, despite the growing urgency that pressed in from all sides. Nathaniel took a deep breath, clearly conflicted. I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes flickered away from mine, as if he was hesitant to lay out the details of what he had found. I've been talking to a few people who've had dealings with your in-laws. People who know what they're hiding. His gaze dropped to the table, his fingers nervously tapping the edge of the wood. But it's not as simple as you think. The family has been covering their tracks for years, Rachel. They've manipulated the system, hidden money, used loopholes. It's bigger than I thought. My heart pounded in my chest as I listened. My mind raced, processing everything he was saying. How could they do this? How could they just get away with it all this time? My voice trembled with a mixture of disbelief and growing anger. Nathaniel looked up at me, his expression tight. They've been doing it for years. Your husband's family, James's family, they've built their empire on lies and manipulation. It's the way they've always operated. And they don't just control the money, Rachel. They control everything. People, businesses, even the truth. I shook my head, feeling the weight of the words settle on my chest like a lead balloon. It was hard to comprehend, hard to believe. James had always seemed so distant from his family, so independent. He'd never talked about the dark side of their wealth, and I had always assumed the best. But now it was clear that I had been naive. My world had been shattered in a single instant, and the truth was far more sinister than I could have imagined. How do we expose them? I asked, my voice steadying with resolve. How do we make sure they pay for what they've done? Nathaniel exhaled slowly, his hands clasped together in front of him. That's the hard part. They've covered their tracks well. But there's one thing I found, one thing they didn't count on. His eyes met mine with a newfound intensity. I found some of James's old financial records. Hidden documents. Transactions that were never reported. It's not much, but it's a start. I leaned forward, my heart racing. What kind of transactions? What are we talking about? Nathaniel hesitated, glancing around the room as if he feared someone might overhear. He lowered his voice. There's money. A lot of it. It's not just business dealings. There are personal transactions, payments made to offshore accounts, investments in places that James never told you about. I think he was starting to uncover something, Rachel. He was getting close to something big. And then he trailed off, his expression darkening. I could feel the tension between us thickening. What had Nathaniel just said? James had been digging into the family's financial dealings? Why hadn't he told me? Then what? What happened? Nathaniel's gaze shifted, and I saw the fear in his eyes. Fear of what had really happened to James, of what he might have uncovered. I don't know for sure, Rachel. But I think your husband was planning to expose them. I think he knew they were hiding something, and that's why they took him out. I recoiled, the words stabbing at me like shards of glass. You think they killed him? You think they... My voice trailed off, choked by the realization that the man I had loved, the man I had married, might have been silenced because of his search for the truth. Nathaniel's face was pale. I'm not saying that for sure, but it's possible. James was too smart, Rachel. He was onto something, and they couldn't afford for him to keep digging. Not when he was so close. A chill ran down my spine, and I felt as though the room itself was closing in on me. James, the man I had trusted, the man I had spent my life with, was he really gone because of this? Was he murdered because he knew too much? I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to push the dark thoughts away, but they kept returning, swirling around me like a storm I couldn't escape. No, I couldn't let myself go down that path. I had to keep my focus. My child needed me to stay strong, to stay focused. If I let myself get consumed by the past, by the pain of losing James, I would never make it out of this alive. Where are these records? I asked, forcing my voice to remain calm. Where do we find them? Nathaniel leaned forward, his face hardening with determination. I know where they are. But getting to them won't be easy. Your in-laws have people everywhere, Rachel. They've covered their tracks so well that it's like they've erased James from the system entirely. But I have a contact, someone who might be able to help us access the files we need. I nodded, my mind already racing through the possibilities. What do we need to do? I'll do anything to get those records. He studied me for a moment as if weighing the risks. We'll need to be careful. If they find out what we're doing, they won't hesitate to shut us down. But if we're careful, if we move quickly, we can get what we need. And once we have it, we can expose them. We can make sure they pay for what they've done. I took a deep breath, the resolve in my chest hardening. Then we'll do it. We'll expose them. I won't let them get away with this. Nathaniel stood up, and for the first time since he had entered my house, I saw something in his eyes that I hadn't seen before. Hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, we could bring them down. Hope that we could uncover the truth and make them face the consequences of their actions. He nodded, his face set with determination. Let's do it. As he turned to leave, I felt the weight of the moment settle over me. It wasn't just about money. It wasn't just about getting back what they had stolen from me. It was about justice. It was about making sure James's legacy wasn't erased, that the truth about his life, and about the family that had betrayed him, would never be forgotten. I wasn't just fighting for my child anymore. I was fighting for everything James had stood for. And I was going to win. The weight of everything, the secrets, the betrayals, the lies, had been building, pressing on me until I felt like I was suffocating under the pressure. I had uncovered some of James's deepest secrets, found evidence of the financial manipulation, and even seen the depths to which his family would go to protect their empire. But there was still one piece of the puzzle left. One question that had been nagging at me since the moment they first blocked me from his accounts. What was the real truth behind my unborn child's claim to his wealth? The lawyer had promised me that the fight wasn't over, that there was still a chance to expose the in-laws for their fraudulent dealings. But I had to be smarter than them. I had to play my cards carefully. And one card, one final move remained in my hand. I had to take the DNA test. The thought of it made my stomach churn. There were still so many unknowns. What if it didn't give me the answers I was hoping for? What if it confirmed the in-laws' lies, that my baby had no legitimate claim to the wealth James had built? The stakes couldn't be higher. But there was no turning back now. I couldn't keep running from the truth, not when everything I had worked for was on the line. The clinic was quiet, almost too quiet. The fluorescent lights above hummed, and the smell of antiseptic filled the air, making me feel dizzy. I had never been a fan of these sterile, impersonal places. But today I wasn't here for a routine checkup or a simple appointment. Today everything hinged on this moment. This test. The results would either give me a reason to fight or make me question everything I thought I knew. I sat down in the sterile waiting room, my fingers tapping nervously against the plastic seat. I had been here before years ago when I first found out I was pregnant. That was a much different time. There was excitement then, joy, anticipation. But now all I could think about was the future, the legacy I was about to inherit, and the family that was actively trying to take it all away from me. Miss Hawthorne. A nurse called out and I jumped, startled from my thoughts. I stood up, smoothing down my shirt, and followed her down the hallway. The process was quick. A simple blood draw, a few vials of my blood taken from my arm. But it felt like the longest procedure of my life. As the nurse walked away, leaving me alone in the sterile room, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The silence in the room felt too heavy. My mind raced with every possible outcome. What if the test came back and proved I had no claim to James's wealth? What if the in-laws were right? What if I had been fighting this battle for nothing? I could hear my heart pounding in my chest as I sat there, staring at the empty walls. Time seemed to stretch on forever. I couldn't focus on anything except the test, the results that would arrive in a few days. It felt like waiting for a verdict, like waiting for someone to decide my fate. 2 days later the call came. I was sitting at my kitchen table sorting through more documents when the phone rang. I looked at the screen, saw the familiar number of the clinic, and my stomach flipped. "Ms. Hawthorne, we have your results," the voice on the other end said, calm but professional. "We'll send the official documentation by mail, but I wanted to let you know that the DNA test has confirmed that your baby is indeed the biological heir to James Hawthorne's estate." I froze. The words hung in the air, the weight of them crashing down on me. The words I had been desperately hoping for had just come true. My baby was the rightful heir. This was the confirmation I had been waiting for. It was the piece of the puzzle that had eluded me for so long. I could barely speak, my voice trembling as I responded. "Are you sure? There's no mistake." The nurse assured me that the results were final, that there was no doubt. "Your child is entitled to the inheritance." I hung up the phone, still reeling from the news. It felt like everything had shifted, like the earth beneath me had cracked open and the truth had risen to the surface. But with that truth came a new understanding. One that was both liberating and terrifying. The in-laws had been hiding something. They had been trying to erase my child from the family's legacy, but now there was no denying it. My baby was part of that legacy. My baby belonged. I stood up and walked to the window, staring out at the city below. The lights flickered in the distance, and I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. I knew that. But this was my moment. This was the moment I had been waiting for. The fight wasn't over, but I had the upper hand now. I wasn't going to let them steal everything from me. I wasn't going to let them erase my baby's future. I had the truth. I had the evidence. And now nothing could stop me. But even as I stood there, feeling the weight of the victory settling in, another thought crept into my mind. What would the family do when they found out? What would they do when they realized that their carefully constructed lies had crumbled? I knew they wouldn't give up easily. They'd fight, manipulate, and use every trick in the book to try to take back what they thought was rightfully theirs. But this time I was ready. The day the results arrived in the mail, I didn't waste any time. I contacted the lawyer immediately, my voice shaking as I relayed the news. "It's true," I told him. "The test confirms it. My baby is James's heir. We have what we need." The lawyer was quiet for a moment, then said, "This is huge, Rachel. We have everything we need now. It's time to act." My heart pounded in my chest as I sat back in my chair. The moment of truth had arrived. It was time to expose them, to take them down and make sure they paid for what they had done. The battle wasn't over, but now I had the power to fight back. The in-laws thought they could get away with everything. They thought they could control my life, my child's life, and they had tried to erase us from the family's history. But now the truth was out. My baby had the right to everything James had left behind, and I would make sure that nothing stood in the way of my child's future. I was no longer the victim. I was the victor, and I would not let them win. The phone call from the lawyer felt like the start of something irreversible, something bigger than me. He had always been calm, composed. His voice a stabilizing force when everything else in my life was spinning out of control. But today I could hear a distinct edge in his tone, an urgency that mirrored the beating of my own heart. "Rachel, we have to move quickly. The in-laws won't wait. We can't afford to let them get ahead of us," he said, his voice serious but not without a thread of hope woven through. "This is it. It's time to make our move." I stood in the middle of my living room, feeling the weight of his words press into my chest. It had been a long, grueling fight to get here, but now that the truth was out, there was no turning back. I had everything I needed. The DNA results, the financial records Nathaniel had uncovered, and most importantly, the conviction to see this through to the end. "I'm ready," I said, my voice steady but raw. "What do we need to do?" The lawyer outlined the plan. We'd file a motion to contest the family's control over the estate. We had the evidence and we had the truth on our side. But even with everything stacked in our favor, I couldn't shake the fear that the in-laws would find a way to worm out of it, to twist the law and manipulate the system the way they always had. But it didn't matter. I wasn't backing down. The court filings were submitted and then came the waiting. It felt like an eternity, each day stretching out as I held my breath, hoping that the wheels of justice would turn in my favor. The in-laws, of course, had already begun their smear campaign. They had the money, the connections, and the power to influence the public narrative. I knew they would pull every dirty trick in the book to discredit me, to make me out to be the villain in a story they had carefully crafted. But I wasn't going to let them. I had my own truth. I had my own story. The day the court hearing was scheduled felt surreal. It was as if I were watching my life from the outside, disconnected from the emotions that should have been surging through me. It wasn't just about money or revenge anymore. It was about exposing the lies that had controlled James's family, the lies that had tried to erase my child and me. This was bigger than me, and I was ready to make sure the world knew the truth. I arrived at the courthouse early, a knot of anxiety twisting in my stomach. The imposing building loomed in front of me, its stone walls cold and unyielding. I couldn't help but feel small in the face of everything, small in the face of this enormous battle that I was about to fight. I walked into the courtroom, my hands trembling as I held the papers that would change everything. The cold, sterile air inside the courtroom seemed to close in around me. There were murmurs from the other side of the room, whispers that I couldn't quite make out but that I knew were directed at me. I felt their eyes on me, the in-laws and their legal team already seated, watching me with smug expressions. I had expected this. I had prepared for this moment. But nothing could have prepared me for the way their cold stares made me feel like an intruder in my own life. The judge walked in and the room fell silent. I stood up, my knees weak but my resolve unshakable. The proceedings began, and for the first time since this all started, I could see the flicker of something in the air. Something real, something that felt like it was within my reach. The in-laws' lawyer was the first to speak, smooth and confident, his words carefully crafted to make me seem like the villain in this story. He painted me as a gold digger, someone who had manipulated her way into James's life for financial gain. The words hit me like a slap in the face, and I could feel the heat of shame rising in my cheeks, even though I knew the accusations were lies. But I wasn't going to let them control the narrative. I wasn't going to let them define me. When it was my turn to speak, I stood tall, my voice steady despite the rising tide of anger inside me. "Your Honor," I began, "the truth is simple. My child is the rightful heir to James's estate. This family has tried to manipulate and control everything for their own gain, and now they want to take away what is rightfully mine and my child's. I won't let that happen." My voice echoed in the silent courtroom, the words ringing with the weight of everything I had fought for. I spoke not just for myself but for James, for the life we had built together, and for the future I wanted for my child. As I spoke, I saw their faces begin to shift. The smug expressions that had once been so confident began to crack, just a little. They didn't expect me to fight back like this. They thought they could break me. But I wasn't broken. Not anymore. The lawyer tried to argue against me, spinning more lies, trying to twist the truth. But I was ready for him. I had the evidence. I had the documents. And as I presented the financial records, proof of the in-laws' manipulation, proof of the offshore accounts and hidden transactions, I saw their confidence begin to waver. The truth was coming out and they couldn't stop it. The tension in the room was palpable. I could feel the eyes of the judge on me, the weight of his gaze like a heavy hand on my shoulder. I kept my eyes forward, never wavering even as the pressure mounted. The in-laws were starting to realize they couldn't just sweep this under the rug. Their carefully crafted lies were being torn apart, piece by piece. The judge took his time, poring over the documents, asking questions, making sure everything was in order. The air in the room seemed to freeze as we all waited for his decision. When he finally spoke, it was like the breath I had been holding for so long was released all at once. "Based on the evidence presented, I find in favor of Ms. Hawthorne," the judge said, his voice firm and resolute. "Her child is the rightful heir to the estate. The actions of the defendant's family have been fraudulent, and they are to relinquish control of the assets to Ms. Hawthorne." I felt the floor beneath me shift, my heart leaping in my chest. It was over. We had won. The in-laws had been exposed for the frauds they were, and my child's future was secure. I could hardly believe it. The tears that I had held back for so long began to fall, not out of sadness but out of relief, out of the sheer weight of everything that had been lifted from my shoulders. I had won. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I could finally breathe. The courtroom was packed, far more than I had expected. The murmur of voices, the shuffle of feet, and the subtle scent of cologne and coffee hung in the air, a sharp contrast to the tension I felt settling in my chest. The world had suddenly become a blur of papers, legal jargon, and bright lights. I had won in the judge's chambers, but this was the real battle. This was the moment that would decide everything. It would expose the lies and the manipulation for all to see. It would expose them. I had never imagined that my life would take me here, standing in front of a crowd, my every word scrutinized by strangers, while the in-laws' cold eyes watched me from across the room, calculating, waiting for me to falter. But I was done faltering. I was done being afraid. I was done letting them win. The lawyers on the opposing side were already preparing their statements, flipping through stacks of papers, whispering to each other in hushed voices. They looked as if they had done this 1,000 times before, confident, smooth, ready to manipulate the truth. But this time they didn't know who they were up against. The judge's gavel struck with authority and the room fell silent. I could feel my palms sweating, my heart racing in my chest. This was it. I would either expose them for who they truly were, or they would continue to hide behind their lies, their wealth, their power. I had no choice but to speak the truth. "Ms. Hawthorne," the judge called, his voice steady, "you may proceed with your statement." I stood up, my legs feeling shaky beneath me, but my resolve was unshakable. I had to do this. For me. For my child. For James. I took a deep breath, gathering every ounce of strength I had, and began to speak. "Your Honor," I said, my voice firm but emotional, "I stand before you today not just to claim what is rightfully mine, but to claim what is rightfully my child's. The legacy of my late husband James has been manipulated by his family, his own blood, and they have done everything in their power to erase us. But today the truth will come out." The words hung in the air for a moment, as if the room collectively held its breath. I could feel their eyes on me, cold, skeptical, calculating, but I couldn't stop now. This was my moment, my chance to make sure James's name and his legacy would not be erased by the greed and lies of his family. "They've tried to discredit me," I continued, "paint me as someone I'm not. They've spread lies about my intentions, my marriage, my future. But the truth is simple. My child is the rightful heir to James's estate. We have the evidence to prove it. We have the DNA test that confirms my baby's connection to James, and we have the financial records that show how his family manipulated the system to keep us out. This isn't just a fight for money. It's a fight for what's right." I could see the in-laws shift uncomfortably in their seats. The lawyer for the opposing side, who had once seemed so confident, now looked slightly less sure. I could tell that my words had unsettled them. The power they had held over me for so long was beginning to slip away, piece by piece. But the battle wasn't over yet. Their lawyer stood up, smooth and unshaken, his eyes glinting with practiced arrogance. "Your Honor," he began, his voice oozing with charm, "the plaintiff has made her case based on assumptions and one flawed DNA test. The truth is not as simple as she would have you believe. She claims to be the rightful heir, but there are many variables, many factors at play here. We have documents, statements, and evidence that contradict her claims." I felt a wave of anger rise in me as he spoke. His words were empty, hollow attempts to discredit me, to take the truth and twist it into something unrecognizable. But I couldn't let that happen. I had come too far. I took a step forward, my eyes locked on his. "You can manipulate the facts all you want, but the truth doesn't change. The truth is in the records we've submitted. The truth is in the DNA test that clearly proves my child is the rightful heir. The truth is in the way you and your family have tried to cover up your wrongdoings, your deceit, your greed." The room fell silent again, and I could feel the weight of my words settling in the air. The opposing lawyer faltered for a moment, his confident facade cracking just slightly. The judge, who had been quietly observing, cleared his throat and leaned forward. "Ms. Hawthorne, do you have further evidence to present?" I nodded, feeling the surge of adrenaline coursing through my veins. This was the moment. I had to make sure the truth came out no matter what. "Yes, Your Honor," I said, my voice steady. "I have the records that prove the in-laws have been hiding assets, diverting funds, and forging documents to keep control of James's estate. I've already submitted the paperwork, but I'd like to present one final piece of evidence, something I believe will make everything clear." I walked over to the table where the evidence was neatly arranged, and I pulled out a thick folder filled with documents, contracts, and account statements. I handed them to the judge, and his eyes flicked over the papers, scanning them quickly. The courtroom was silent, everyone holding their breath as the judge read through the final piece of evidence I had submitted. It was the smoking gun, the moment everything changed. As the judge finished reading, he looked up, his face unreadable. "This is troubling," he said quietly, his voice cutting through the tension in the room. "It appears there are indeed discrepancies in the estate's management, and the documents provided by the defense are highly questionable. I will need time to review these, but this is certainly a turning point in the case. A wave of relief washed over me. The truth was finally coming out. There was no longer any denying it. I had exposed the lies, the manipulation, and the fraud. The in-laws' hold over James's estate was unraveling before their eyes, and they couldn't stop it. But even as the victory began to feel real, I knew there was still more to be done. The battle was far from over. This was just one step in a long journey, and I had to be prepared for whatever came next. The judge called for a recess, and I felt my body relax for the first time in what felt like forever. I had done it. I had exposed them. The court had seen through their lies. As I walked out of the courtroom, I felt the weight of everything that had happened finally begin to lift. But the fight wasn't over. Not yet. I had won this round, but I knew the war was still raging. And I was ready. The courtroom doors swung open with a finality that echoed through my bones. The judge's decision had been rendered, and for the first time in months, I felt the weight of it settle around me, not as a burden but as a promise. My hand shook slightly as I gathered my things, but it wasn't from fear anymore. It was from the overwhelming sense of relief, of vindication, that flooded through me. I had done it. I had exposed their lies, their manipulation, and I had secured my child's future. The in-laws sat on the opposite side, their expressions still smug, but I noticed the cracks in their armor. The disbelief in their eyes, the way they avoided looking directly at me. They knew they had lost. And now there was nothing they could do to undo the damage. The tide had shifted, and I was standing on solid ground for the first time in a long while. I walked out of the courthouse, the cool air outside feeling refreshing against my skin, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt a deep breath of freedom fill my lungs. It was as if the air itself was lighter, freer, no longer burdened by the weight of secrets, lies, and hidden agendas. My eyes scanned the street in front of me, the world still spinning, still moving forward. And so was I. My phone buzzed in my pocket and I pulled it out, not even having to glance at the screen to know who it was. Nathaniel. Did you hear? His voice was breathless, a mix of excitement and disbelief. We did it, Rachel. It's all over. You did it. I smiled, my fingers trembling as I held the phone to my ear. Yeah, we did. I could hear the relief in his voice, the way he too was processing what had just happened. But it's not over yet. We still have to make sure they don't pull something else. They're not done fighting, not yet. True, he agreed. But you've turned the tables. No one's going to mess with you anymore. You've earned this. His words felt like a balm to the rawness I had carried with me for so long. I had earned this. I had fought not just for money or power, but for my dignity, for my child's future. I had fought for the truth, and the truth had won. I sat in my car for a long while after the call ended, not ready to go home yet, not ready to face the quiet emptiness that still lingered there. The house I had once shared with James, our home, felt like a distant memory, something I had lost along with him. But today that memory was different. Today I could see it clearly again. I could see the future we had hoped for, the future I was now building, not with James by my side but for him, because of him. The world outside my car window was bustling, full of life and motion. The city moved around me, a whirlwind of people, cars, sounds. But inside me there was stillness, a rare moment of calm. I let myself sit there for a moment, just breathing, letting the calmness settle deep into my soul. When I finally got out of the car, I walked back into the house, feeling like a stranger stepping into a space that had once been familiar but now seemed foreign. The walls felt different, like they held echoes of everything that had happened, but I was no longer burdened by them. The house had been a symbol of the past, of the life that had once been mine. But now it was a symbol of strength, of perseverance, of my ability to reclaim my life, my truth, and my future. It wasn't just the house that had changed, it was me. I ran my hand along the countertop, tracing the lines of the familiar surfaces, and for the first time, I didn't feel the weight of grief or loss pressing on me. Instead, I felt a quiet, growing sense of anticipation. I had rebuilt everything I thought had been taken from me. And now there was a future ahead of me, a new chapter that was mine to write. The next few weeks felt like a blur. There were phone calls, paperwork, and the slow unraveling of the in-laws' final attempts to maintain control. But every time they tried to fight back, every time they made their next move, I stood firm. There was no more backing down. The law was on my side now, and the evidence was irrefutable. They couldn't manipulate the truth anymore. But amidst the battles there was also a quiet peace settling in. I spent more time with the people who had supported me through it all. The ones who had stood by me when I had nothing, when it felt like the world was against me. They were my family now, the ones who truly mattered. The ones who had never judged, never doubted me. And with them I found a new sense of belonging, a new sense of hope. Then the day came. The one I had been dreading and anticipating all at once. The day I found out I was having a boy. I hadn't expected the rush of emotions that came with the news. I thought I would be prepared, but when the doctor told me, I was overwhelmed. A son. James's son. The child I had been fighting for, the one I had sworn to protect. It hit me like a wave. Everything I had been through, all the pain, the loss, the fear, it was all worth it. Because this child, this little boy, was mine to protect, to raise, to love. And suddenly, everything that had once felt like a battle, a fight, became a distant memory. All that mattered was the life growing inside me, the future we were going to build together. I would raise him with everything I had, with all the love James had left behind, and with all the strength I had found in myself. I sat down on the couch, a smile spreading across my face as I placed a hand over my belly. Felt like a new beginning. Like the end of one chapter and the start of another. For the first time in so long, I wasn't thinking about the past, about the pain and the battles that had brought me here. I was thinking about the future. About the life I would give my son. About the legacy I would create with him. A legacy built not on lies or manipulation, but on love, strength, and truth. And as I sat there, I knew that no matter what came next, no matter what the future held, I was ready. Because this time I wasn't just surviving. I was living. And that made all the difference.